Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to live Facebook, the Sinclair Method, and podcast with myself, Bruce Rose, and Katie Lain, very, very, very early in the morning in America, I think. So,
not right
Katie.
now. It was earlier. Good morning. It's 10 a.m. for me, so it's not that early anymore.
Oh, it's not too bad. So here we are again. Thank you very much. And
yeah, thanks for having me.
So it's just for anyone that doesn't know, we're Katie and I are looking at doing a monthly, wherever we can, a monthly live Facebook stroke podcast. We're going to upload it. I was just saying to Katie the other day, last month's podcast, we will upload it shortly. I know Katie's an expert at internet and computers and stuff, so I'm going to pick her brains afterwards and work out how we can do that. So
yeah, we want to share it on more platforms. So yeah, we'll do that.
So we'll get that sorted. We'll have questions as we go through. If you're watching live, just on the side there are comments. So please feel free just to fire questions away if you've got any questions. And Steve Cooper's here already. Evening, Steve.
Hey, Steve.
So I think tonight we were discussing, we were having a little chat earlier on, or during the week and everything. And Katie came up with the idea. I'm going to not blame you. It's a very, very good topic. But the habitual side of the whole process, the habit side of the thing. And we'll talk into lots of other different areas and different discussions and different things. So if anyone has got any questions, please feel free to fire away and we'll answer what we can. So, okay. Do you want to introduce yourself, Katie, and then just introduce habits or?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Katie. I went on the Sinclair Method in 2017, and it really helped me to truly change my relationship with alcohol. I was on it for a year, and after a year, I decided to go sober just because I lost interest in drinking over that time, which was amazing. Now I work with RIA Health, and I coach people one-on-one through the Sinclair Method, as well as I'm very involved in the community as well. And one of the biggest challenges I see with people on the method, myself included, I think it's common for nearly everyone, is the habit piece of drinking. Because when you go on Naltrexone, for example, the medication can work really well to kind of quiet the craving of alcohol. So you're not obsessing about it as much. You're not, having those intense cravings anymore over time. But what happens is the longer someone's on the method, it can be hard to distinguish between the craving aspect of drinking or the habit piece of drinking. For example, I was someone who at 5 or 6 o'clock every night, I was popping open my bottle of wine and having that ritual almost every night. And so the longer I was on the Sinclair Method, I would find that I would still do that, but the desire to do it wasn't as strong. Kind of like how you might mindlessly eat a bag of potato chips, even if you're not really hungry, you're just kind of doing what you've always done, and you're not really thinking about it. And so there comes a point on the Sinclair Method where it is challenging to, pause and say, is this really a craving to drink? Which if it is, it's an opportunity to take naltrexone and have an extinction session. But if it's not really a craving, you really need to examine that, because what it is a habit, and that's something that can be changed slowly over time with kind of conscious awareness placed on the activity and proactively doing other things. And I know, Bruce, when you and I were talking yesterday, you kind of broke down what you defined as a habit, and it had several different components. I wonder if you want to talk about that, because it can be kind of like, well, what do you mean habit? Like, what is that? And I'm curious if you wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, I don't know if I can explain it any better than how you've just explained it, but it was actually something I heard in the very, very early days, that before someone starts on the Sinclair Method, they drink from two different places. So one place is craving and addiction, which is what drives that obsessive drinking. And the other side is habit, which includes emotional, psychological, circumstantial situations and reasons why people drink, past experiences, present experiences. So what I then realized after a while, and from reading The Cure for Alcoholism, the Dr. Roy Escarpa book, I realized, or I read in there, that after about 90 to 100 days, a big part of the craving has been eradicated, basically through the use of the medication. So I was really struggling in the early days trying to figure out, because people would ask me, what is the difference between craving and habit? And I never actually came to a full, proper answer, because I was like, well, when is it craving? When is it habit? What, all that kind of stuff. And then when I read it in The Cure for Alcoholism, I then realized that after 90 to 100 days, most people's craving has been eradicated through the process. So then after that, I realized, oh, hang on a minute, after 90 to 100 days, the majority of people's drinking will therefore be habit, most of it, the majority of it. And therefore, I realized that once they've been on the program 7 to 10 weeks or around that period, I've then noticed that after the 7 to 10 weeks, if all I do is I work on the habit after that, whatever you do, take your pill, take your pill, take your pill. Now, from this period onwards, all we need to do is work on the habitual side, work with the diary, and then that just reduces it all the way down. So it was kind of it was my cop out because I couldn't define what the difference was, literally. And then I realized that, okay, well, the process after that 7 to 10 weeks, then basically eradicated the craving side of it. And then, so therefore it was all habit. And when I then started focusing in on the habit, I then noticed, I said to people, don't focus on the figures on the diary, although keep the diary because that gives us a guide, but focus on the habitual side, change that, and automatically the diary will start to drop. So yeah, so that was, yeah, and it seems to have worked. It's not the perfect way of doing it, but it saved me defining the difference.
Yeah.
But you were mentioning as well about the habit side of it and how, and then going into that habit side about how changing different things and changing different versions up. How does that side of it work?
Yeah, it's a process, and I'm a big fan of doing habit change in a really kind of microscopic way where it doesn't feel like you're doing all these changes all at once, but rather kind of chipping away at it and doing little things that are a bit of a stretch for your current routine. And I'll give an example, but not something that's like, oh, I'm going to have a week of abstinence after 2 months on the Sinclair Method and just kind of fight cravings the whole time. That's not what we want to do here. And I think, if you're craving alcohol genuinely on the Sinclair Method, that's an indication that it's time to have an extinction session, meaning take the naltrexone, wait an hour, and drink. So I think it can be most sustainable and helpful for people, like I said, to kind of do things in bite-sized pieces so that they are allowing themselves to create new rituals and routines that can slowly replace the alcohol. And so, say there's someone on the Sinclair Method and they're still drinking 7 days a week and haven't had an alcohol-free day yet. They may not quite be ready to have an alcohol-free day just yet. That might be something where it's really white-knuckled and really a challenge for them. And so in that case, I might encourage people to start by, say they start drinking at 5 o'clock. Can they instead at 5 o'clock go for a walk around the block or watch some funny videos online or do something else that can feel nourishing and satisfying to them before they go into their drinking session? Now, that's not to say they're not going to drink that night. They may still have that extinction session, but it's about starting to intercept that normal routine that they're in of, 5 o'clock, pop the Nal, 6 o'clock, open the bottle, go for it. It's like, how can I start intercepting that at all, really in little ways that where you will start to experience yourself doing different things that feel good. Hopefully you're doing something that feels really good for you, whatever that is to you. And it's a really simple thing. Like I said, I remember I would watch really funny videos on YouTube because there's just an endless supply of them. I'd find myself cracking up and I knew, oh my gosh, I was getting endorphins to my brain. I wasn't drinking, but then I would still, okay, I'm going to have my extinction session later. But just starting to do new things that can start to slowly replace the alcohol. And then with that too, during the extinction sessions, meaning when people are drinking on the naltrexone, to switch up that ritual in any way possible. After your first 2 drinks, can you pause and take a 30-minute break and go cook dinner or take a shower or whatever? People always talk about switching up your drink. So if you're a wine drinker, try having beer one night. Try drinking out of a coffee mug instead of a beautiful wine glass. Just all of these things that you can do. And, I really feel like I always tell people, like, be curious, make it fun, kind of test your boundaries in a way and like see, oh, what does this feel like? Or what happens when I do it like this, as opposed to reprimanding yourself and saying, oh, I shouldn't be drinking, or I'm drinking too much. Just start to push your own boundaries a little bit and test out different things, and really see what fits, what doesn't. And then that ultimately can start to lead to greater success. And so that's really about, the just habit piece, that ritual piece, but there is a whole other piece to it, which is like the coping piece of alcohol. So if you're still someone who's leaning on alcohol every night to drink because you hate your job, or you're really depressed or anxious, that's another piece of it where, yes, you still want to kind of interrupt those routines and bring in healthier behaviors, but doing so in a way that's really going to make you feel really cared for. And even, seeking out videos online or resources to learn, like, how do I cope with anxiety naturally or depression naturally? And that really involves, taking radical steps to take really good care of yourself. I think for myself and many others, alcohol can sometimes feel like this big security blanket that we wrap around ourselves, and it's super comforting. Though I think that's an illusion for a lot of us. Unfortunately, we start to see that the more we detach ourselves from alcohol. But in a sense, finding new ways to wrap yourself in that security blanket. And to be honest, in my journey, I bought a huge fuzzy blanket, and I would like wrap myself in that, because I would want to drink sometimes after a really stressful day and I just felt all depressed and upset. I would really find ways to just simply nourish and comfort myself. So I think that's really important as well, because when we're drinking a lot every day or regularly, it's kind of very self-destructive, and it's a way that we're abandoning ourselves essentially. And so we need to kind of come back to ourselves and our basic needs and just check in, like, hey, how are you? Like, as if you're your own parent. Like, what can I do to make you feel good right now? Like, maybe an ice cream cone, maybe a blanket, maybe a bath, like just those simple ways, and just to start practicing with those things. And over time, I think you get better and better at it, like with anything. What are your thoughts on that, Bruce?
Absolutely. I mean, it's I've created a phrase. I think I call it circumstantial drinking or habitual drinking. And I was just on top of that, I was speaking to someone the other day, and as I'm watching the diaries coming through, what happens is on a week-to-week basis, people are sending me each day. So I've drunk 10 units, 10 units, 10 units, and it comes through each week. And then quite often, this was about a year ago, I realized that sometimes as the drink diary was coming through, it was 10, 10, 10. And then on one day, it would be 20. And then it'd be back to 10, 10, 10, 10. And I'd look at that and I'd go, all right. And then I'd speak to the client on the phone, and they'd go, oh, no, I messed up. And I went up to 20 units and da-da-da. And I learned very quickly. And I just asked one question. And I said, right, okay, did you take your pill? And they would say, yes, I did. And I said, right, so that 20 that you drank that day, absolutely no problem. And they went, what do you mean no problem? And I said, well, that is what I call circumstantial drinking. And if it's after that 7 or 10 weeks, and I then realized it was habit, the medication was dealing with the craving. So therefore, if there is a spike in 1 day's drinking or 2 days drinking, I suddenly realized that's because of circumstance or habit. And I realized very quickly that something had happened. I said to them, what happened that day? Nothing really happened. I said, well, no, something did happen that created the old you to kick back into play, because that comfort blanket, you were using alcohol that day to deal with something or to celebrate something. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. And then they said, oh, well, yeah, actually, I had an argument with my partner. So that's what I always do. I just go and have a bottle of wine, and I got to stuff it and have a bottle of wine. And I said, and then a lot of times they'll try and justify it. And I'll say, well, listen, don't worry about it. I said, that's the beauty of the Sinclair method, is it allows you time, and I heard this the other day. It was a great expression. It allows you space. That was Katie, by the way, on the last one. So then it allows you the space to then learn how to cope with that emotional situation or circumstantial situation, by reducing what I then say to people, okay, so having an argument with a partner increases your drinking, so that's one pattern. The rest of the week, 10, 10, 10, 10, that's another pattern. So what we now need to do is learn to adjust, just coping mechanisms of how do we deal with that argument when we have an argument with a partner. So I say to people, next time, give yourself permission to have 3/4 of a bottle extra. But like you said, go for a walk around the block, go into the garage where you've got a punch bag and punch the bag a few times, and then give yourself permission to come back and have 3/4 of a bottle. And then they're learning how to deal with that circumstance without the substance. So you can take the blanket off for a second, but then they can put it back on again until they feel safe and comfortable to then go through that. But I realized that there was a difference between circumstantial drinking once people have been on the medication for a while and drinking from craving. And when they're drinking from craving, that emotional circumstance the drink would then spiral. It'd be 2 drinks and then it would just go on for weeks and weeks or days and days. So
that's such a compassionate way you have about it too, Bruce, because from my perspective, those experiences where we overdrink, like you're talking about the circumstantial periods of overdrinking, those are learning opportunities. And I would bet it happens to 99.9% of people who go on the Sinclair Method at least once, where you overdrink and you're like, oh man, I was doing so good. What happened last night? And for me, that's information. I knew every time I overdrank on the method, I would look back and be like, what was different? Oh, I didn't wait the full hour. I didn't eat. Oh, I was in a social situation and having a great time and just doing what I always do and not pay attention to how many drinks I was having. So there's always information you can glean from those experiences and take it forward for next time. Like you're saying, okay, now that person knows that his fight with the spouse is a trigger. Next time when that fight happens, oh, I know what's going to happen. So I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm still going to have my security blanket, but I'm also going to go punch the punching bag or do something else. And you start to retrain yourself to respond in new ways.
Yeah. And it allows you, I mean, I came up with this great idea about a month ago where I came up with this concept of it creates a safe space.
Please.
We were having a joke last time we spoke that I was about to call you Claudia there, Katie.
I would be glad for you to call me Claudia.
Katie came up with a great expression about the nice thing with the Sinclair Method is it creates enough space for you to then learn to readjust to things. And we were just having a laugh that it's always the case when you hear something the first time. I used it the day after Katie, and I said, Katie Lain last night was saying, and then the second time was to one of the guys who was actually on here. And I said, I heard the other, and then I caught myself. I went, no, Katie said.
Oh, I don't care. Take it. I don't need it's not trademark. Trust me.
Yeah. So Jeff is saying, Katie has a terrific way of telling her story and offering advice. And I agree with that, Jeff.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
And hi, Jackie. Jackie's an amazing lady that I know from locally. So it's, I'm just absolutely, every time I talk about the Sinclair Method, I just get blown away with how logical the process is, and how just by, I don't know, I'm learning over the period of time that it's not just the medication is absolutely vital, and you know that yourself, and it's without the medication, the craving kicks back in again, and we go back to square one. But the habitual side is so important. And people say to me, how long does the Sinclair Method take to work? And I used to sort of say, well, between 3 and 9 months. And then I thought, well, actually, it really depends, because the hardest part of learning to adjust as the alcohol levels are dropping and down to wherever, people have to learn to readjust to life without the security blanket, without the substance, without alcohol. So that journey or that reduction is completely different for everyone based on their current situation, their past experiences. Some people can do it very, very quickly. Some people, they might be in a tricky marriage. They might be in a work situation, like you were saying, that's difficult. So with those people, I would then reduce them a bit slower. or just run through that. So the habitual side is nice because I realized on an abstinence-based program that the heart, it's nothing to do with the people or anything else in abstinence, but when people stop drinking like that, they have to deal with the physical craving, the withdrawal, the detox. Then on top of that, they then have to deal with life. And that's the hard part. All of a sudden, they've got all the habitual stuff. They're coming home from work, or they're coming into the house, or they normally have a drink. They have an argument. They have a good news. They go to a wedding. I used to work in rehab centers, and the last few weeks of people leaving, we would always say to them, don't go to any weddings, don't go to any parties, don't go to any Christmas things. Wherever there's alcohol, stay away from it. Because if you haven't reversed the process in the brain, then the craving is still there. Mm-hmm. I'm going way off track here, but
no,
but it's, yeah. So the habitual side, the habit is so tied in as well with taking the medication, like you were saying, having an extinction session, that each time you do that, it's breaking down more and more of the pathways in the brain. And I'm just absolutely blown away of the number of people that I'm working with that have reduced right the way down, that have, there is no craving. The craving has just gone away. The obsessive thinking has gone away. And like yourself, I mean, you were saying that you had 2 weeks where you suddenly woke up and go, oh, hang on a minute, I haven't had a drink. And so that craving had just, through the habitual process.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to ask you, because Steve Cooper put in there, isn't that also the lizard brain fighting back against the extinction process? And I know Claudia speaks about the lizard brain, and I see people struggle with it where, you know, they don't really have that strong desire to drink, or they have a couple of drinks and they could stop there, but they just keep going. And I'm curious what your experience is working with people on that level, when it's like they always drink a bottle of wine and it's hard for them to do anything different than that, because that's what their brain is used to getting and they're used to having that amount. So what would you say to that challenge of it?
I'd kick them off the program. No, I wouldn't. No, that's my old abstinent thinking coming in. Yeah. Get with the program or get out of here. No. What was the question again?
Just like, because I think a lot of people experience the challenge of the lizard brain. Like their brain is used to getting that fix that it's always gotten, and now the naltrexone's blocking it, and so they kind of drink beyond the naltrexone, or they get that feeling of, I don't need more, but they just keep drinking.
Yeah, right from the very start when I'm working with people is I've realized from the diaries that I get through, because I ask for diaries from every client, and I've seen diary after diary after diary after diary, and there's a very, very common pattern in the first 2 weeks, and that common pattern is that I take a note of someone's units that they're drinking before they start the program, and so as soon as they come on and they send me the first 1 or 2 drink diaries, I would say 98% of the time, I will always see a drop of 30 to 50% in their alcohol intake. So if they're drinking 100 units, almost guarantee it will drop to somewhere between 50 and 70 units within the first 2 weeks. So I say to people, just drink whatever you feel is right to drink the first 2 weeks. And then it levels out. And then from day one, I'm saying to people, that will happen. And then after that, it will level out. It will go up and down a little bit, but it will level out. And at that stage, everything from that stage onward is all to do with habit. So everything, and it's right from the very start, I'm just explaining to people, okay, the majority of what I do, that I'll keep, the only thing I'll nag you for is to take the medication, because if you're doing that, there's no craving. Everything else is all to do with habit. So speaking to me on a week-to-week basis, all we're doing is we're looking at how we can change up the habits, how we can change the drink, how we can change the time you drink, how we can go from spirits to wine, or spirits to beer, and so right from the very start, and then very quickly people go to me, they say to me, I had a drink last week, but it was just habit. So that already they're thinking it. But then at that point, I say to them, well, actually, hang on, the habitual side is actually the hard part. So don't beat yourself up and knock yourself down because you're finding it difficult to change a habit, because if you're really old like me and you're 54 and say I've been drinking for the last 30 years, then that's 30 years of habit that and build up of this habit and that habit. And there's a whole bunch of my wife's a counselor, and she would say it's like an onion, so you've got to take off all the different layers of onions. So there's a whole load of habits. If someone's younger, I find it actually happens quicker because they don't have that many, the habitual side. So, so yeah, it would just be a case of I try and explain as much as I possibly can, and about that side of it. So,
yeah, I agree with what you said. The habit piece is the most challenging part, I think, for a lot of people, and it's kind of a surprising hurdle because it's, at least for me, I didn't realize how much I was drinking out of habit. I just thought, oh, I like to drink, and if I lose the desire, that will be that. But it's such an ingrained habit for emotional reasons, boredom, happiness. Being happy and in a good mood was one of my worst triggers to drink because alcohol would just make me a little bit happier. And so I had to work on that for a while, where it's just like, oh, I'm so happy. I want to, like, I'm craving alcohol because I feel so good. It's just like, that was a challenging one, but it's something that, can be hard for a lot of people. And it's totally doable. People do it all the time, but it takes consistent effort and just, making those changes for yourself.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question that Karen's asked? And sure. Karen said, can you talk about the role of mindfulness when it comes to changing the habitual aspect of drinking?
Yeah. So I always recommend the book Atomic Habits to people by James Clear. I just love how he presents habit change. It's a lot of what I was kind of doing with my own TSM journey and working with others. About really, again, in really small ways, changing those habits. And I think the first step of it, to Karen's point, is noticing those habits, noticing those cycles and those loops that you're stuck in. And so I'll give an example of a client I had where she'd been on the method for a while, was losing the desire to drink, but was still drinking a lot more than she wanted to. And I was encouraging her to just, okay, let's start just paying attention to your triggers that are causing you to drink more than you want to. Like, what is kicking off that cycle? And so she noticed, like, just the only goal, like, don't even change any habit. Just first start paying attention to what is happening before, during, and after your drinking sessions. And so she noticed one of her main triggers was every time she went to the grocery store, she would buy alcohol. Whether or not she had a plan to drink or not, she would just stock up on alcohol. And so she noticed this, and when she realized it, the next time she went to the store, she intentionally did not buy alcohol. Instead, she bought iced tea, and she was telling herself, okay, I'm breaking this habit loop. And that's not to say she's never going to buy alcohol again at the store or go back to that old habit, but she's using just basic awareness to notice, okay, I notice every time I go to the store, I buy alcohol. This time I'm not going to. I'm going to get something else. And that in and of itself is intercepting that routine. And if you can do that on a consistent basis, it's not going to be perfect for most people, but if you can just start paying attention, okay, what are the triggers? What are the things, the smell, the place, the people, the emotion, all of these things that are causing me to want alcohol? How am I responding to those things? Can I respond differently? And then also, during the drinking session, are you just kind of turning on the TV, kicking back and drinking, or are you really tasting it, taking breaks, measuring, all these ways you can just pay more attention to the process. And then at the end of the drinking session, either that night or the next day, to really reflect back on the whole experience, from the trigger, the emotion, how much you drank, and see what insight you can glean from it. But I think with mindfulness, the first step, before you get out there and try to change all these habits, I think for a lot of people, is just start paying attention to it. Start noticing these trends and these patterns. And that's where you can see the opportunity to intercept that habit loop that you're stuck in.
And absolutely amazing. The one thing that I wanted to just throw in here as well is that with abstinence-based programs, when I worked with them in the past, they work well for a lot of people. So I've got to stress that. So we never knock that side of it. But the similar things are taught in rehab centers and AA and different places like that. And they're all very, very good processes. But I just want to stress that the difference with that side of things, abstinence-based programs and the Sinclair Method, is that I watched an amazing video that was talking about how they measured the endorphins and all that kind of stuff the other day. It was absolutely fascinating. And And but on the Sinclair method is because you're taking the medication that is dealing with, it reduces the flow of the endorphins in the brain, and what that does is it takes away the craving. And if the number one cause in abstinence-based program for relapse is craving, that's the majority of the causes. So once you've removed the craving, then somebody said the other day that if you've been a heavy drinker and you go into an abstinence-based program and you've been sober for 2 weeks, and you go into either therapy or you go into a group program or something else, you don't hear a word of what's being said. You go into it and someone's saying, well, listen, this is how to deal with your habitual stuff, and you do this and you do that, because someone in that state of mind, the craving is, anyone that's been there, the craving is so strong that all your brain is thinking craving, and you don't, what the person is saying to you is blah, 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 blah. It could be the best advice in the world, but that craving in some cases wins. So what I was trying to emphasize was on the Sinclair method, as you're doing what Katie's talking about and stuff, is that all that habitual stuff is actually quite easy to do because you don't have the craving kicking in at the back of it. If you don't have the craving kicking in, then the reduction, all the little habitual changes, as Katie's saying, is actually quite easy to do as long as you don't take a huge big bite. As long as you keep making little changes and a very structured process, then, and you don't have the craving kicking in at the back of it, then that process is actually quite easy. And that's the big difference. And then and I love the way Katie says, just do little bits, because when you do the little bits, that then becomes sustainable. I say to people, if you're going to make a change at something habitually and you can't maintain it for a week or 2 weeks, then it's too big a change. So just don't change that huge bit. Bring it back to something you can control. But without the craving, it actually becomes quite easy. And as long as you do it in a very manageable process, that's the huge difference between the abstinent program. Some people do that on the abstinent-based program, and that's just pure grit. And I take my hat off to people that do it. But if you're there, I know there's someone watching tonight that has been through that abstinent-based program. Just stick doing what you're doing, and I take my hat off to you. Keep going for it. But take that, create the number one, the number one cause of relapse that we had in the rehab in rehab was caused because of craving. And the Sinclair method gets rid of that, and it makes the habitual side so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And very well said. And I will say, when you start to make these really small changes and you see yourself respond differently, like the woman at the grocery store, that's a powerful experiential memory. Like, next time she goes to the grocery store, she knows before she was able to not buy alcohol. Maybe this time could be the same, but the more you see yourself succeed in these really small ways, it just builds that confidence and momentum toward progress and change. So it really is about kind of just starting somewhere, even if that's just noticing, first of all, where you're at. And Eric said, I find that when I'm alone by myself, I talk myself into drinking because I'm sad that I'm alone. And in that case, I'm curious, Bruce, what you would think. I would just say that the loneliness is certainly a trigger for people to drink. And I think if that is a trigger for you to, again, like experiment with different ways that will be the opposite of sad. Like, what can make you feel happy? As I said, just watching a funny video or doing exercise or whatever, but just test out those things. And you may still talk yourself into drinking, but at least you're trying new things, like with some training wheels on. Okay, let me see if this makes me feel better. And if it doesn't, you really want to drink. Good news is, if you're on the Sinclair method, you can still have that extinction session. But it's about trying out these new ways of responding to those triggers. In your case of sadness, or depression is a big one for people. Just experimenting with new ways to respond. And Bruce, do you have anything else to say to that in that type of circumstance?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the last 12 months that's been the whole cause with COVID and everything else, is that, and again, we all know that isolation is the number one thing that people want to do when they're drinking. And unfortunately, COVID has fed into that whole process. But it goes back to, I think, Eric, what Katie was saying is it can also be a comfort blanket as well. So there is if someone's on their own, depending on what someone's background is, what their present experience is. I'm lucky enough to be married to a lovely lady, but if I was back on my own again, I don't know how I would. I can't guarantee I wouldn't be back on doing something with. I'll use Naltrexone though now, thankfully. But just that, whatever situation is that's creating it, sometimes, or the habitual past, quite often is that I'm creating that. There is a bit of comfort in it, is what I'm trying to say. It's not. I don't know how to explain it best way, but it's not it is a slightly negative thing, but quite often it depends on where someone is in the process. If someone's grieving, sometimes that you need to go through a process of loneliness and dealing with the grieving, with the grief. Sometimes we get to the stage where we've gone through that process, and then we need to now make, like Katie's saying, go and watch some videos, watch the I can't think of any black and white. I was thinking of the Stanley and Laurel and Hardy, all that kind of. Go and watch something like that. There's also situations where there is anxiety and depression as well, which is a chemical imbalance again. So again, if that's the situation, then speak to a doctor and get that under control. But yeah, it's just one other habit that don't try and suddenly change it all in one go. Try and just do it little by little. If you struggle going out and about, then one day go out for 10 minutes and come back again, and then the next day go out for 20 minutes. So.
And I just want to say something real quick, because you brought up, I forgot what you said, but it just made me think of the fact that when we're drinking to cope, often as people with alcohol use disorder do, it's like we're not equipped to be able to feel these uncomfortable emotions and kind of ride the wave of them, even though naturally we're born to be able to feel these things and naturally kind of cope with them. Like if you think back to when you were a kid and you felt sad, you would go to your room and maybe play with a toy and let the emotion kind of flow through you, and then it would be gone and you'd be back to your normal self again. And I think with alcohol use disorder, we're so used to just reaching for alcohol. Like as soon as we feel that discomfort, that we're used to that immediate kind of numbing effect. And part of this method and process is to sit with those uncomfortable emotions and learn to ride those waves. And I believe it's like, we all have the ability to cope naturally, but alcohol makes us depend on that. It becomes our crutch. And so the more we can practice building our coping muscle, the stronger and stronger it'll get. The first time you feel really sad and you're sitting through the emotion and not reaching for alcohol, it's like, oh, I hate this feeling. It doesn't feel good and it's uncomfortable and it's hard, and maybe you'll end up drinking that night. But the more we can practice sitting with those emotions and dealing with them in ways that are more healthy for us, the stronger and stronger we'll get at being able to cope with those tough emotions. But it does take practice and seeing yourself, even if for 5 minutes you don't reach for the naltrexone or the bottle or whatever, and you just sit with it and again try something else to cope with it. But it does take practice and getting comfortable with those uncomfortable emotions. And again, you're naturally able to cope with those things. Like look at any kids that are doing that, coping with all of their emotions. But you just gotta relearn that process.
And I hope Eric doesn't mind me saying this. I'll just use his first name, but he said he is grieving over the loss of his mother. So sorry to hear that, Eric. So,
me too.
And again, just remember with that side of things is that grieving or grief is also a process as well. So the nice thing with the Sinclair Method as well is that we try not to be too hard on yourself. As long as you're taking the medication on 100%, then there is the grieving process. There's a whole bunch of information on it, Eric, that there is a process that you need to go through as part of that grieving process. And it goes through lots of different stages. That it goes through anger and all that kind of stuff. If you can learn as much about that, if you can get, this is a hard one for men, so I can say it to Eric. us men are very reluctant to go and get any sort of counseling or support from it. Again, that side of it is absolutely massive. Even if it's just a case of just going and talking and just being able to speak to anybody and just go bleh, just I call it go and throw up over somebody, but that's what they're trained and paid to do. So that's maybe an idea. There are, like Katie was saying, there's lots of activities, there's lots of different things. Everyone's got a different view on spiritual side of things, but if that's something that interests you, go have a look at that side of things. There's a whole different array, but also remember that there is a process, and that give yourself the credit. You've been through the loss of a loved one, especially a parent, is a massive, massive thing. So try not to be too hard on yourself, and just give yourself time. And just as long as you take the pill, you're not going to go backwards. It's not going to spiral out of control. So just take the medication and slowly start to move forward with it, and get support if you can. If you think you need it. If you don't, then just work through it. So I was going to ask Katie. There was a big, long question that came in from Steve, I think.
Yeah.
My reading's not great. I'm dyslexic, so forgive me. So Steve was saying, please, can I ask Katie? I'll take my name out of that one.
Or Bruce.
Katie's advice or perspective on someone who has difficulty in 100% compliance on TSM.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just finishing reading the question. That's a challenging piece. There's this book called Beyond Addiction: How Science and Kindness Help People Change. And in there, it talks about like a behavior change cycle, essentially, that people go through. And ambivalence to change, or indifference to change, or even not even like lack of readiness to change, are part of that behavior change cycle. So if someone's not compliant with the naltrexone, often when I see this happen with people, they aren't quite ready to let go of alcohol in the way that they've known it, meaning they still want to be able to get drunk or numb out or feel that same endorphin rush buzz that you get when you don't drink with the naltrexone. And so from my perspective, they're just not quite ready to commit to the process. And that's not a bad thing. Again, the ambivalence to change is part of the behavior change process. It's like someone who loses weight. Maybe they'll do a couple diets or change their eating habits, but then fall back and do it again and fall back. And then finally they can stick to it and lose the weight they wanted to lose. And so for those people, I often just encourage them, if sticking to the naltrexone 100% of the time isn't something that they can commit to right now, then what's a step behind that they can start doing? Can they start charting their drinks? Can they start doing a breathalyzer, or changing their habits, or even just noticing their habits around drinking and saying, okay, I notice I want to drink a lot when I'm triggered in this way, or I feel this way, or I'm at this place or around these people. So just starting to kind of do some information gathering and becoming more curious about their relationship with alcohol, and noticing all of the ways they're turning to alcohol for different reasons, whether it's emotions, boredom, anxiety, whatever it may be. And so for those people, like if they're partially compliant on the method, I think if they're taking naltrexone some of the time, like that's good. Though I know through Dr. Umhow, what he said is when sometimes people take it and then they skip doses, it's like their receptors are extra sensitive because they've been blocked the previous time. So then alcohol can be almost extra reinforcing and extra pleasurable. So it can really throw you for a loop if you're kind of not consistent with it. But I think if that's where they're starting, okay, then what can we do to, again, encourage them to do other things around, incorporating new ways to cope when alcohol's not in the room, or just noticing habits and things like that. But it's not an easy situation, because being compliant is the first step toward change. Whenever I work with someone, I'm like, that's the golden rule. Like if you can't do that, then this process is going to be really hard. But again, not to say that's, then there's nothing you can do for them. It's just about, okay, what other things can you do to start noticing or shifting the behaviors and habits around alcohol as often as possible. Bruce, what do you think on that? That's a tough one.
Yeah, I think you're bang on when you at the beginning when you said a lot of time it's the fear of not having alcohol as their comfort blanket. It's become so ingrained in their lifestyle and everything that they've done. I don't know. I think the more understanding that people have of how the process works, then the more confidence they have in it, because all they know is abstinence, and they just know that. I've had some people coming on the Sinclair Method that actually have a blowout before they come on the Sinclair Method, because they think that as soon as I take this pill, I'm never going to drink again. And then that reignites all the fears from abstinent days of going through a detox and all that kind of stuff, and the craving and everything else. So I think you're absolutely, there's nothing really more to add to that, Katie, because they're not quite at that stage where they're ready to go for it. So we just need to, I would say more explanation. You don't have to stop drinking straight away. It's a process, blah, 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 and how the whole thing works. I think so much with the Sinclair Method is education. And that's where Katie's been amazing. Everything I learned in the early days was from Katie and Claudia's videos. But it was education and getting people to understand that. I explained the process to someone the other day as an upside down process, because everything we do is completely opposite to what we've been taught for the last everything else. Take medication and it will help you. Right. Okay. Don't do that. Drink. And I had someone the other day who I could hear on the phone they were going into withdrawals. So my advice to them that day was, you need to go and buy a bottle of wine and drink, because they were getting to, that's a different subject, but they were getting into a case where the withdrawals could have got quite dangerous. So the advice was, go and drink. Take your pill, but go and drink. And it's like, this is upside down and crazy. So I think people all the time just have to understand how the process works. And then when they realize that it's actually a very gentle way of bringing them down, it's a very graceful way, it's a very kind, safe, it's just a really, really nice way of reducing. And I think when people do start to understand, so more videos, more books, I would send them the book, The Cure for Alcoholism. There's those. But again, they might, like you're saying, Katie, they might not just be ready for that. So.
Yeah. And I think too, as you're saying, educate yourself. That's so important. Watch inspirational, motivational videos about people who've, are just living their best life, or people you admire, because that, like, getting inspiration from others through online videos or content, that can really help build your own motivation to further commit to the process. And so, that can all be things to kind of like build that foundation to make you ready for the change. It's just, it's a process, and it doesn't mean it won't ever happen. I've talked to so many people who started this method many, many times and never fully committed, never did it properly. And now they're finally committing and they're seeing the change. And so maybe it just takes a few times of attempting it and not quite doing it right. And then finally you get ready to commit.
Yeah. Okay. And Craig has said he started off on 140 units a week and he's down to less than 60 a week now.
Wow.
So,
That's amazing.
So yeah, well done, Craig. You better be down to 50 tomorrow, because I'm on the phone to you, I think, tomorrow. No, only joking.
Now he's going to go up to 70 because of that. The pressure now.
And I'm the circumstance. So.
Yeah, exactly. You realize you're the one making me want to drink, right?
So I was going to ask you one question as well, because it suddenly dawned on me the other day. I've never gone and watched it. I need to go and, well, that's not true. I listened to the first 10 minutes. But you did an amazing interview with Dr. Roy Escarpa, who wrote the book, The Cure for Alcoholism.
Yeah.
And I need to go and have a look at it, or have a listen to it. So what was the one or two things that you got from just speaking to Dr. Escarpa?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is we talked about the safety of naltrexone on the liver. I think that's a concern a lot of people have. And I see that question all the time in the forums. And he shared with me that naltrexone on the liver is less harmful than like an over-the-counter acetaminophen or pain medication. And so for me, that was really comforting to know, not being a medical professional myself, but having that question asked of me all the time, like, is this going to hurt my liver? So that was reassuring. And in a talk Dr. Umhau did, he talked about how, when you're on naltrexone, even if it isn't, the best thing for the liver, as you reduce down your drinking, your liver can improve health-wise because you're drinking less. So that was one thing. And I think the second thing is just hearing his anecdotal stories and tidbits and experiences working with David Sinclair. I mean, he was literally on the ground as this method was being discovered and researched, and just hearing those little pieces of information. And Roy is so humble. He was almost like, why would you want to interview me? Maybe he didn't say that exactly, but he was just very humble. I was like, are you kidding? You're you don't know how well known and respected your name are in this realm. So just personal stories and experiences from him through this method in the early days and to where it's at now. I think that was the really fun part about the interview.
It must be, and he was. I mean, he is so humble, and so many things that I see from Dr. Sinclair or David Sinclair. It just, I'm just blown away when I start to find out and hear. I didn't realize until just recently that he did 25 to 30 years of research on the whole process, and
wow.
I mean, it was to go through that level of research and clinical studies and trials, and people say to us, well, is this something you just thought of the other day, Bruce? And I thought, well, if I had, I'd be in the Bahamas probably.
Yeah.
But I'm just absolutely. My apologies, Karen. I've just realized the name came up, Katie, and I recognized Karen, and I'm thinking I know that name from somewhere, but my apologies, Karen. I've just clicked who you are. So, so welcome. So we'll have to get you on one day as well. And,
yeah, you should have Karen on. She's amazing.
And
Can I read what she put here? Because it is just very she says that because she works one-on-one with people on the Sinclair Method as well. And she has a big background in recovery and health and wellness and all of that. So she says, I find it helpful to straightforwardly ask clients why they were non-compliant. Did they just forget the medication that day, or were they intentionally looking for euphoria or escape from that alcohol offers? Was it just a one-off, or is it repeated non-compliance? And I think that is really important to get down to the bottom of it. Is it, one-time thing where they forgot it and they're just like, oh, forget it? Or are they wanting to numb out and get those numbing effects and everything in between? So I think that's really important.
Mm. And it's, I've only actually just met Karen today. So, so I I know that she works with clients. So, thank you, Karen. You're doing an amazing, I don't know what you're doing or how you're doing it, but if you're working with clients with a TSM, well done. Fantastic.
And you're going to come on the podcast with Bruce next. So get ready.
Yeah, no, love to have you on. It's Katie was saying just before we came on, just sounds like a radio tape. We were just saying it sounds like radio tape. Before we went live, you were saying something absolutely fascinating that has just gone whoosh up my head. It was that good. I've completely forgotten what it was.
I don't remember what it was.
Anyway, it's gone. It was very good. That's what happens when you hit 54. Your memory starts to go. So. Whenever I'm talking to people, I seem to go on different tangents, and then I try and come back to what I was talking about, but sometimes I completely lose it and just go completely off track.
Yeah, that's okay.
So I think we're coming to the hour. So was there anything else in?
I just saw Aaron, because I've read about kudzu, which is a natural, I think, herbal supplement from plants that are, I know there's a lot of them on the East Coast, I believe. He's been taking kudzu, he says, on alcohol-free days to help with cravings as well as cleansing the liver. And Steve mentions milk thistle for the liver as well, but that's interesting because I've heard about kudzu for helping with alcohol cravings, so that's good to know.
Mm. And lots of other things like doctor we work with, I don't work with him, but we connect with him, Dr. Umhau, and he talks a lot about nutrition and magnesium and omega-3, and in this country we call it thiamine. I don't know if you have thiamine in the States.
I think we do, yeah.
It's vitamin, very, very high dose of vitamin B, because alcohol draws out the vitamin B. So So again, all that nutritional side is something we're looking at doing here in Scotland, is introducing a nutritionalist into the whole process as well. So, any ending wisdom?
Oh, geez, put me on the spot. No, I don't think so. I think the biggest thing is, with people who struggle with alcohol, we often are very hard on ourselves, and we're kind of prone to beating ourselves up because that's the treatment method we've all been exposed to. It's like feeling that shame and regret over drinking too much. And I think the Sinclair method is really a kind way, as you said, a gentle way to undo this issue and just to give yourself some grace and some time to work through this, and realize that the slip-ups or mistakes are just super valuable learning experiences. So don't reprimand yourself if you overdrink or don't fully comply. Just take away what you can learn from the experience and move on and try again the next day.
And I'm just absolutely, I've lived many years in a family where the drink was, in Scotland we call it the drink, where drink was a huge thing in the family. I've, like all of us, we've all seen people and been through it ourselves. The abstinent-based programs are fantastic for those that it works for. I always say that if standing on your head reciting the alphabet backwards works, then I'll support it. I will do everything. Whatever works for someone. But if someone is at the beginning of their journey of recovery, then the Sinclair method, like we're saying, Dr. Sinclair did 25 to 30 years of research and clinical studies. The Sinclair method works. It's not something that Katie and I have just come up with last week. It wasn't something that's just been invented in the last week. There is neurological scientific proof for the whole process. It has a 78% clinically tested success rate. Take the medication, stay compliant all the time, and then start working on the habitual stuff, and the volume will reduce. Katie's seen it, I'm sure. Person after person after person. I have never seen the results that I've seen with the Sinclair method in abstinent-based programs. And that's just to say that the abstinent-based programs work very well for some people. So if that's working for you, or you think that's your way down, then go for it. But I'm just trying to emphasize the success that TSM have. It's brought me to tears sometimes, just watching person after person after person. And I remember in the rehab centers, the majority of the time we were firefighting. We were trying to make sure that people didn't relapse. Are you okay? Right, let's do this, let's do that. Come on, we can do this. Whereas now it's not effortless, but it's beautiful. It's the only way to describe it, as beautiful. So
yeah, it really is. I think Karen, I just want to read her comment that she said, one of my physicians I work with once told me 95% compliance with TSM will give you 0% results, which I think that just speaks to like the golden rule of how important compliance is. And I know I talked about the behavior change cycle, which maybe I'll post this in the Facebook group comments just so people can see the different stages of this and how, the pre-contemplation is a perfect place to be for some people, and they can get to the other stages as their readiness increases.
Okay, I think will do us. If you're in the States and you need any advice or wisdom or coaching or even just questions, if you're watching this live, you'll see down the bottom, or if you're watching it or listening to it on a podcast, Katie's website is embody, EMBODY, embodydailyoneword.com. And if you're in the UK, alcoholrecoveryscotland.co.uk. If you're anywhere else, then either of the two, and we'll put you in touch. If you're French, Katie speaks fluent French.
Not exactly, but I can get by.
You can get by.
I'll have my husband translate.
She has a way to get around it. So no, seriously, if you need to get in touch with us, even if it's just for questions, or if you need to just find out a bit more about it, Katie's website's got a whole bunch of stuff on it. If you go into YouTube, just type in Embody Daily on YouTube, I would imagine, or Katie, Lain, or the Sinclair Method, and Katie's all over YouTube. So, and the videos on there are absolutely amazing. So.
Yeah, and there's the daily TSM Zoom calls for group peer support, which Bruce hosts 2 of them on Thursdays, and we have other hosts throughout the week. I'm on Tuesday now. And I know, let's see, someone was asking, are we able to share this live feed with other Facebook people? Do you know that answer, Bruce?
With other, it's yes. I'm trying to work out. If you go into YouTube, I've got the 1 or 2 up on YouTube already. I've got a channel on YouTube, but I don't even know what it's called yet. So I need to find out what it's called. The Sinclair Method Scotland, or Alcohol Recovery Scotland, or something along those lines. The Sinclair Method TSM, or something along those lines. If you search on YouTube, you'll find it. But we're going to put it on there. I'm going to get it to Katie as well, because probably the best place is to get it on Katie's until I can work out how it all works. But it'll be available, I would imagine, if that's okay, Katie.
Yeah. I want to post it on my channel, so it's on my YouTube channel as well.
Yeah. The one we did last month, I've got it on my computer, so I need to just work out how to send it to Katie. As you can imagine, I'm not the best with computers.
Once you learn, you'll get it down.
Yeah, Katie's going to give me a lesson afterwards. So. Okay, is that us? I think we're done.
I think so. Well, Steve Cooper is saying, can I promote my own UK TSM peer support website? What do you want to put it in the comments, Steve, in the Facebook comments?
Yeah, you put it in the comments and then I can read it out loud. So thank you again, Katie.
Yeah, thanks to you, Bruce. And yeah, also plug for the TSM conference for C3 that's coming up June 12th and 13th. It's going to be the 2-day event. So if you go to the c3foundation.org, you can find the information. I don't think they've posted the schedule yet, but they've announced the speakers.
So fantastic. Okay, it's on so it's www.facebook.com. Oh, right, okay.
It's a Facebook group. Well, it's in the comments, so people can click on that, Steve.
It's UK TSM Peer Support Group on Facebook. And Steve's knowledge on the Sinclair Method is very, very good. I would recommend it.
Awesome.
Okay, I think that's us. So thank you, Katie. And
thank you.
All going well. We should be back here the first Wednesday of next month, if you're okay. I'm looking at you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same time. We might need to try and adjust it some other time to try and fit in a better time for you, if we can do
that works. This works for me. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good week. Any questions, get in touch with us, and we'll speak to you all soon. Thank you very much.
Bye.